My husband's family invited me to a celebration in their Manhattan penthouse. But when I arrived, my boss was there, a glass of champagne in her hand. They didn't offer me a seat at their table. They offered me an exile to London. My husband, Julian, squeezed my hand, his eyes pleading as he told me my disappearance would save his family's business. In that sterile, high-rise moment, I realized I was no longer his wife. I was just an obstacle on an architectural blueprint waiting to be demolished. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed, and for most of my adult life, I sought refuge in the quiet, stoic honesty of old buildings as an architectural historian. My work was a dialogue with the past, a mission to preserve the soul of New York as it was written in stone, steel, and forgotten documents. I found more truth in a building's foundation, in the careful placement of each brick, than I ever did in the fleeting promises of people. I believed, with a quiet and diligent pride, that I had constructed my own life with the same meticulous care, building it upon what I thought was the solid bedrock of a decade-long marriage to Julian DeWitt and an intimate, if sometimes suffocating, bond with his influential family. I was profoundly, devastatingly wrong. The truth is, the cracks in my own foundation had been silently spreading for months, hairline fractures of doubt and unease that I had willfully chosen to ignore until they finally shattered completely under the cold, sterile lights of a Manhattan penthouse. The beginning of the end started not with a dramatic explosion, but with a scent, faint and foreign, a whisper of a truth I wasn't ready to hear. It was a crisp October evening, the kind where the city air feels electric with change. Julian came home late, a chill clinging to his coat and the sweet, cloying perfume of another woman woven into the fibers of his cashmere scarf like a ghost. He brushed off my questioning glance with a practiced, charming ease that had become his second nature, blaming it on a celebratory hug from a new client in a crowded lobby. It was a plausible lie, expertly delivered, but it felt thin, brittle. I wanted to believe him. The alternative was a chasm of uncertainty I wasn't ready to face, so I let the silence hang between us, another brick in the invisible wall he had been building for months. He disappeared into the steam of the shower, a familiar retreat, and I was left in the charged quiet of our apartment. It was then I began my nightly ritual of tidying his leather briefcase, a small, almost unconscious act of a devoted wife, a habit I'd maintained for 10 years as if to prove that some things, at least, remained constant and true. But that night, my routine was irrevocably broken. My fingers, expecting the familiar, soft feel of real estate contracts, instead found a stiff, rolled-up tube of paper tucked deep inside an inner pocket, as if hidden with intent. A cold, sharp tendril of curiosity, or perhaps a long-suppressed dread curled in the pit of my stomach. I carried it over to our marble coffee table, the heavy silence of the apartment pressing in on me. My hands, usually so steady when handling fragile historical artifacts, betrayed a slight tremor as I carefully unfurled it. The soft golden glow of our lamp illuminated a detailed architectural rendering, a soulless vision of shimmering glass and steel that seemed to claw arrogantly at the sky. It was a monument to modern excess, and it was designed by my own boss, the celebrated and notoriously ruthless starchitect, Isabella Sterling. My breath caught, a painful, jagged knot in my throat. This wasn't just any building. The address, printed in small, precise letters at the bottom of the page, was a location seared into my professional soul. It was the site of the Argyle, a magnificent pre-war masterpiece whose very existence I had been fighting to landmark for the better part of a year. This blueprint wasn't just a plan for a new tower, it was a death warrant for a piece of history. And it had been hidden in the briefcase of the man who shared my bed. I carefully rolled the blueprint back up, my movements slow and deliberate, a strange sense of detachment washing over me as if I were observing someone else's life fall apart. My mind, trained to find patterns in history, began to work with a terrifying clarity. connecting a constellation of previously ignored facts. Julian's increasingly frequent late nights, which he'd explained away as networking dinners. The hushed, urgent phone calls he would take on the balcony, turning his back to me as he spoke in low tones, the sudden extravagant gifts from Isabella that would appear at my office for a job well done on projects I knew were only moderately successful. It all clicked into place with the sickening finality of a heavy vault door slamming shut, locking me out of the life I thought I had. This wasn't just a simple, sordid affair born of passion or momentary weakness. It was a calculated conspiracy, a professional and personal betrayal that targeted not only our marriage but the very core of my life's work. A primal urge to scream, to shatter the serene quiet of our curated home, rose within me like a tide. I wanted to confront him the moment he stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel and his false innocence. But another instinct, colder and far more powerful, took hold. The historian in me, the part that valued evidence over emotion, strategy over outburst, took control. I took a photo of the blueprint with my phone, capturing every detail, every damning line, and then carefully placed it back in the briefcase, exactly as I had found it. He would never know, not yet. The knowledge of his betrayal became my secret, a cold, heavy stone I now carried within me. A few days later, the phone rang. It was my mother-in-law, Beatrice, her voice a syrupy, sweet melody that always set my teeth on edge. She was inviting me to a small, intimate family dinner at her penthouse overlooking Central Park. This was not a casual invitation. That apartment was Beatrice's throne room, a stage reserved for the DeWitt family's most significant announcements and power plays. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach, but I accepted with a calm I didn't feel. I had to walk into the lion's den to understand the nature of the beasts I was facing. I arrived that evening, dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress, a silent armor against the battle I sensed was coming. I had hoped, foolishly, to find some rational explanation, some thread of sanity to grasp, instead. I walked directly into a meticulously orchestrated ambush. They were all there, arranged in the grand living room like a tribunal. Julian stood by the window, refusing to meet my eyes, his posture radiating guilt. His parents, William and Beatrice, were seated, a united front of familial power, and Isabella Sterling, who looked perfectly at home on the velvet sofa, a flute of champagne held delicately in her manicured hand. The air was thick with unspoken agreements, heavy with the weight of my impending doom. Beatrice began the assault, her smile a beautiful, cruel mask. She spoke of necessary sacrifices and the unstoppable march of progress, her words a smokescreen for the greed that truly drove them. Then Isabella took over, her voice as smooth and cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. She offered me a life-altering promotion, the head of their new London office. It was a gilded cage, a lavish form of exile designed with surgical precision to remove me from the equation, both professionally and personally. Then came the final devastating blow. Julian, my husband of 10 years, the man I had built a life with, finally moved from the window and took my hand. His palm was clammy, his grip weak and uncertain. "Evie, think of what this could mean for us," he pleaded, his gaze shifting nervously between me and his mistress. "It would be good for everyone. It would save the family business." And in that single gut-wrenching moment, the full, horrifying scope of their conspiracy was laid bare. His family didn't just know about the affair, they were actively leveraging it. They were complicit, trading my happiness, my career's most important project, for a financial lifeline thrown by my husband's wealthy lover. They were selling me out to save themselves, and they had the breathtaking audacity to package it as a golden opportunity for me. I did not break. I did not cry. The pain was so immense, so absolute that it transcended tears. It crystallized into a single, diamond-hard purpose in the center of my chest. I forced a small, tight smile onto my lips and told them I would need some time to consider such a generous offer. I asked to see the full terms, the contract, the fine print. This performance of detached, corporate professionalism seemed to reassure them. They saw me as I had always allowed them to see me: predictable, manageable, and ultimately weak. They had mistaken my silence for submission. It was a fatal miscalculation. The moment the heavy penthouse door clicked shut behind me, the woman I had been for the last decade ceased to exist. The historian in me, the part of my soul that they had so thoroughly underestimated, took complete control. My grief was not an ocean to drown in, but a furnace to forge a weapon. They saw history as a collection of dusty, irrelevant stories. I knew it was a living force, and I would wield it to dismantle their world. I informed my assistant that I was taking a personal leave to deal with a family matter, which was, in its own grim way, the absolute truth. My days were no longer spent in the sleek, minimalist offices of Isabella's firm, but in the hallowed, hushed halls of the city's municipal archives, surrounded by the scent of aging paper and leather-bound ledgers. I began my hunt. I was searching for the one thing I knew could stop their monstrous project cold undeniable: legally binding proof of the Argyle's historical and protected status. Hours blurred into days. I pored over old property deeds, tax records, and city planning maps from the 19th century, my fingers tracing the ghosts of a forgotten New York. I was building a case, not just for a building, but against the soulless, rapacious greed that sought to erase it. While my days were spent immersed in the past, my evenings were focused on their criminal present. I hired a discreet forensic document examiner, a quiet, meticulous man named Mr. Alistair Finch. I provided him with copies of the development proposals and zoning applications that the DeWitt family and Isabella's firm had submitted, all obtained through public records requests. I had a historian's intuition that their desperate rush to get this project approved must have led to carelessness, to arrogance, to crime. A week later, Mr. Finch confirmed my suspicions in a hushed phone call. He had found conclusive evidence of digital forgery on a crucial environmental impact waiver. More damningly, he discovered that the signatures on several key ownership transfer documents were masterful, but fraudulent copies. They hadn't just been unethical, they had broken federal laws. Believing their wealth and influence placed them beyond consequence, I now had proof of a conspiracy to defraud the city. The final piece of the puzzle, the keystone of my entire case, came to me late one rain-swept night in the deepest corner of the archives. I was examining the original 1888 architectural plans for the Argyle, a beautiful hand-drawn document on brittle, yellowed linen. My fingers traced the elegant lines when my eye caught a tiny, almost illegible note in the architect's spidery handwriting. Tucked away in the corner, it read TC Post-Installation behind West Wall. TC Time Capsule. My heart began to pound against my ribs. It was a detail so obscure that no developer would ever notice it. But for a historian, it was a flare of hope in the darkness. Getting into the building was the next challenge. I used my professional credentials, claiming I was conducting a final structural survey for the Historical Society. The building's weary superintendent, a man who loved the old place as much as I did, let me in without question. He led me to the old manager's office, now a dusty storage room, behind a cheap, modern drywall panel. I found it a small, copper box, green with age, prying it open. I found a set of documents wrapped in oilcloth. It was the original deed of title and a handwritten will from the building's first owner, a philanthropist who had bequeathed the Argyle to a charitable trust with a legally binding covenant that it should stand in perpetuity as affordable housing for artists and could never be demolished. The entire DeWitt empire was built on a foundation of lies. The climax was set for the night of the official project launch party, an exclusive event for investors hosted, in a final act of supreme arrogance, in the sprawling penthouse of the Argyle itself. I received an invitation. Of course. They expected me to be the gracious, defeated wife. They had no idea I was coming as their judge, jury, and executioner. I walked into that party, a silent predator in a sea of sharks. I saw Julian laughing with an investor, Isabella at his side, her hand possessively on his arm. He caught my eye and gave me a weak, apologetic smile. I just smiled back, a calm, serene smile that seemed to chill him to the bone. When the time came for the speeches, Isabella, in a final act of condescension, introduced me as a talented historian who would speak to the rich history of the neighborhood. She handed me the microphone, a triumphant gleam in her eye. I stepped up to the podium, History, I began, my voice even and clear, is not found in books. It is a living truth, a foundation, and sometimes it is hidden, waiting to be rediscovered. As I spoke, the large screen behind me flickered to life, not with their glittering tower, but with a high-resolution image of the original 1888 deed from the time capsule. Then, the philanthropist's will, with its unbreakable covenant, beside it, Mr. Finch's forensic analysis, highlighting the forged signatures in glaring red. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw the color drain from Beatrice's face. Julian was staring, his mouth agape. These documents were recovered from a time capsule sealed within the walls of this very building, I announced. They tell a story of a legacy that was stolen. Then, I played the audio file. Beatrice's sharp, commanding voice filled the silent room, instructing a forger on how to replicate a signature. The silence that followed was absolute. In that moment, the grand glass doors of the penthouse swung open. It was two investigators from the district attorney's office and a senior member of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, followed by a swarm of reporters I had tipped off an hour earlier. The flash of cameras began to pop, a frantic, blinding strobe light illuminating the scene of the crime. I didn't stay. I placed the microphone gently on the podium, walked past the stunned, ashen faces of my husband and his family, and stepped out onto the terrace below me. The lights of New York glittered, the sirens grew louder, a fitting soundtrack to the collapse of an empire. In the months that followed, the fallout was catastrophic for them. The DeWitt family was ruined, their business collapsing under lawsuits and criminal charges. Isabella was stripped of her license. Julian called hundreds of times. I never answered. The Argyle was granted landmark status. With a portion of my divorce settlement, I established the Argyle Trust, a foundation to preserve historic buildings. I had lost a marriage, but I had found myself. I learned that the strongest structures are built not of brick or steel, but of truth. And the best way to deal with a rotten foundation is not to patch it up, but to tear it down and build something honest and beautiful in its place. In life, as in architecture, the most beautiful facades can hide the most compromised foundations. We build our lives around people we trust to be our cornerstones, only to discover that sometimes those very stones are the first to crumble under pressure. This story teaches us a profound lesson that truth, like a building's true north, is an unchangeable constant. It can be hidden behind false walls or buried under forged documents, but it cannot be erased. The ultimate triumph isn't found in the thunderous collapse of a structure built on lies, but in the quiet, steady work of clearing the rubble and building anew on a solid foundation of your own integrity and self-worth. It is in the silent victory of choosing not to be a victim of a story written by others, but the architect of your own. Thank you for joining us on this journey of betrayal and reconstruction. What does it mean to you to build a life on a foundation of truth? We would be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of quiet strength resonated with you, please show your support with a like, and to ensure you never miss another tale of profound resilience, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We are so grateful to have you here.